if we start off with the DVD, how come the time was right to do the album in its entirety at this point in your career?
Well, from my point of view, they asked us at the end of the Mirrorball tour, towards the end of the Mirrorball tour, we were asked, were we interested in doing a residency in Vegas? And we kind of knew it was on its way. They'd been sounded out in the past, and we'd been reading about Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, and we knew about Cheap Trick and Elton John and all these people that were doing residencies there. Rod Stewart, you know. And we all figured it was a matter of time before we were asked. And when they did ask, they said, you know, one of the specifications about the residency was they wanted us to play the entire Hysteria album. And we were just coming to the end of the Mirrorball tour. We were essentially promoting a live album with 3 new songs. And it kind of made sense because, you know, what's the point of going in to do a residency if you're just going to play a greatest hit set? That seems a bit mad. And we said yes straight away because it was the first time that it made sense for us to say yes to doing an entire album. We'd been asked in the past to play like Hysteria on tours, but we've always said no because it would have overshadowed whatever we were promoting on that particular tour. Say, back in 2008 when we were touring all over the world on Sparkle Lounge. So, you know, to have played the Hysteria album, it would have overshadowed the songs from the Sparkle Lounge album. And, you know, it would overshadow any album because it's the most commercially successful record we've ever made. So we weren't going to, you know, create a problem for ourselves when we were trying to promote new music by really focusing hardcore on an entire album from our past. So when they said yes to when we said yes to the residency, which would have been about August, September last year, we knew that we had about 6 or 7 months before the residency was going to start. And you know, it's pretty obvious that, especially for a band like us, we weren't going to write, record, and release a new album in 6 months. So we could spend all our energy making sure that this Viva Hysteria thing was a real big deal.
Yeah. So there are some tracks that you have never played live before. Did you have to go back and learn those songs again, or did you have them in the back of your head, or how much?
Oh, no. We played nearly everything. I think Don't Shoot Shotgun was the only one that we hadn't played, and even then, I'm being told that we did play it once or twice on the Hysteria tour, but I just don't remember, you know. For sure, Vivian hadn't played them because he wasn't in the band, you know. But out of all the songs on the Hysteria album, the ones that get played the least are things like Run Riot, Don't Shoot Shotgun, Excitable, Love and Affection. Gods of War comes and goes. It's kind of half there at the moment, but things like Sugar, Armageddon, It Love Bites, Animal, they're pretty much in the set since day one, you know. They're easy. So, no, we had to do a lot of homework, you know, because we wanted to make a real effort to present the songs almost the same as they are on the record as best you can. And when there's only 5 of you on stage and the record sounds like it's played by about 40 people, it's a real challenge because we did a lot of overdubs, you know, in a similar vein to, like, say, what Queen would do, you know, to make that a great record. And it's a challenge to pull it off live. So, you know, we're a much better band now than we were when we made that record, but it's still a massive challenge. So it wasn't a case of just trying to remember it. We really did our homework. You know, you basically spend a lot of time walking around the house wearing headphones, listening to the record, and going, oh, that's how it goes, you know, and saying to yourself ridiculous things like, whoops, I've been singing the lyrics wrong on that one for 20 odd years, you know. I mean, it's a journey of rediscovery and a lot of homework, so that when we turn up for rehearsals, everybody knows their parts.
So what lyric have you been singing wrong for all those years?
Well, I can't remember. It's not so much wrong, it's just different. You know, what you do is you change a lyric, or you change a guitar chord or an orchestration part to suit the song in a live environment. So, for example, on Sugar, I've teased with the crowd a lot. Sometimes I don't even sing the words, I hold the mic out to them, or, you know, the words get changed to suit a live environment. You know, you might be singing, you know, I'm hot, sticky, sweet from my head down to my guess what, you know, and you sing that so many times that you have to make a conscious effort not to do it if you want to perform the song the same as you on the record.
Yeah.
So it's just tiny little inflictions that you drift away from the original. I mean, you know, you think about like somebody like Bob Dylan could never probably play the song the same twice, you know, and Queen and Zeppelin used to change the arrangements of their songs all the time. So, you know, we've been the same. You know, we do things slightly differently, and they just move, they grow, and they change as the decades, you know, go past.
Yeah. But considering you did so many overdubs on the record, did you have to do any backing tracks for this performance?
No, everything's live. Okay. The only thing that's not live, and it's even that, the sounds are played live on a foot pedal, is obviously the little noises like the beginning of Love Bites or the rocket sounds in Rocket, things like that. You know, we're not going to get, you know, bring a rocket in to the auditorium. You know, there's those type of things, you know, that they're just sound effects. Mm-hmm. Of course, you know, we play them on foot pedals, but all the backing vocals, all the instrumentation, everything is live. You know, Rick uses a few loops on the drums on Rocket because it's an entire drum orchestra, and you know, God bless him, he's only got one arm, so anybody's entitled to use pedals and triggers. It's Rick, you know. But everything that you hear on the top line, as we call it, the lead vocal, the backing vocals, all the guitars, bass and the drums are all played. There's no overdubs on it at all. It's absolutely 100% live. We didn't cheat. We didn't go back in the studio and redo it. You know, we've been emphasizing that because people just never believe you. They'll think you're making too much of a point by telling people, but it's absolute God's honest truth. I did no overdubs. Nobody did any overdubs. It's just us live. Mm-hmm. But we're a good band, you know. I mean, it always surprises me that it is a surprise when somebody says, well, that's actually live. Yeah. Maybe everybody else is just shit, you know, I don't know. Yeah. But we really work hard at what we do. Yeah. And that's why, you know, we can do it. Of course, every band has a bad night here and there. You got a sore throat on the road. You can't help but sound, you know, out of breath or raspy. Or if somebody's injured their hand, they're going to not play very well. Like, Phil had a real problem on this last European tour with his left hand, and he's actually in a cast right now because he had a tendon issue. Yeah. And he was handing solos over to Vivian, you know. But we managed to get through it, and not many people really noticed. But it wasn't that he played badly, he just was unable to play certain parts, so Viv did them instead. And that's, you know, because we're a good team and we know there's no ego involved. It's like, well, will you take this bit on tonight? You know, yeah, no problem. And we swap harmonies. If I've got a guy with the highest voice, and sometimes I have to do the harmony and somebody else sings the lead vocal. And that's, you know, that's just because it's a team and we want it to work out best live as it can be. But we work very, very hard to sound as good as we do.
Yeah. Do you see yourself doing perhaps Pyromania in the future in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it hypothetically for a couple of months because it's the question that most journalists are asking us the most is, will you do it again and what will you do? You know, and the answer is yes. We would love to do it again because it's one of the best experiences that I've had in 35 years of being in this band. Mm-hmm. I loved being there. Same bed for nearly a month. I mean, are you kidding me? No travel. It's superb. You just can't beat it, you know. So, unless somebody desperately said, you know, so many people missed out on seeing Hysteria, we've got to come in and do Hysteria again. We would obviously probably be asked to do a different record, you know. Yeah. So, Pyromania would be the logical next record, but the problem with that is that it comes in at 42 minutes. It's not really very long to hang an entire show on, so I have a feeling that there's as much chance as not that we would do 2 albums. You know, maybe High and Dry and Pyromania, or Flying and Pyromania, or whatever, you know, on through the night. It could be anything, really.
Yeah, okay.
That's a decision that we'd make when we know we're definitely doing it.
Yeah. So if we go back in time a bit, to 1984, when you started to work on the follow-up to Pyromania, how was the vibe within the group when you went to Dublin to write the follow-up? Did you feel any pressure?
Not really. We were too much like kids in the candy store. You know, we just finished a year-long tour, so chances were, we were a little burnt out on the road. And I think we were just glad to have feet on terra firma, and we weren't going anywhere. We were going to wake up the next day in the same bed that we went to bed in and go back to that bed the following night. You know, it wasn't get up and get into a car, get into an aeroplane, get on a bus, you know. We were going to be feet on the ground for 6 months, you know. So I think there was a nice bit of relief, you know. I don't think we were actually feeling any pressure when we first got there. I think we were having too much fun because the first thing we did was rent an empty house. So the second thing that we did was furnish it. So we had to go to the furniture store and buy all this stuff, and we were just messing around and then going to the pub and getting drunk and just being kids, you know. We were in our real early 20s still. Rick was probably still only like 18 or 19 or something. We were still kids, you know. And we were just wanted to enjoy the success that we just achieved with the album. So we didn't really go gung-ho at first. The first 2 or 3 weeks, I think we spent just getting used to being a successful band, you know, but in a place where nobody knew who we were, because we were not a successful band in Ireland. You know, we were a successful band in Japan and America and in Canada, but we were still playing clubs in Europe and city halls in England, but we were actually in Dublin. Mm-hmm. One place we'd ever played in Dublin by then was the TV Club, which held about 300 people. Mm-hmm. So we could walk down the street, nobody had a clue who we were. It was bliss. It was absolutely brilliant, you know. And then we slowly but surely started getting into the writing theme. You know, we had a little studio set up in the back room of his house, and we'd go in every day and goof around, and we came up with a lot of stuff. I mean, we really did come up with a lot of stuff, but only about half of it made the Hysteria album. Mm-hmm. It was, you know, we went to Holland 6 months later with about 15 songs written, of which 6, I think, made the album. And the rest of them turned up in different forms as B-sides or on the retroactive album. Things like Fractured Love, Desert Song, I Want to Be Your Hero, Ring of Fire. They were all originally scheduled for Hysteria, but by the time we got to Holland, and we'd gone through the whole Jim Steinman process and recording on our own, once Mutt came back in and we started producing the record with Mutt, some of the songs were just starting to date pretty quick, so we just elbowed them and started writing fresh ones. So we had things like Women, we had a form of Animal even though it got changed, we had most of Armageddon It, we had, what else did we have? We wrote Rocket brand new out there, we wrote Love Bites, we wrote Love and Affection, I think we had Don't Shoot Shotgun mostly, but maybe without some of the lyrics. We had Run Riot. We wrote things like Sugar. That was the last thing to get written. So half the album got written over the next year or so, and half of it came with us from Dublin. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. For how long did you try to work with Jim Steinman?
About 8 weeks.
Okay. So you knew...
And it just didn't work. You know, we kept leaving it another week, give it another week, see if it works, you know. And everybody kind of knew after the first 3 or 4 days that this was a total disaster. But due to the contractual obligation of working with him, we just had to stick it out. And it just wasn't working, so we just had to stop. And it was the smartest thing we ever did, really. It was obvious it just wasn't going to work. Jim works well in a certain way with certain artists, but for Def Leppard, it was the wrong choice.
Yeah. When you started to write the album, how clear were you with how the album was going to sound, and how big input did Mutt later have in the sound to make this modern sounding record?
Well, when we first started writing it, we weren't, you know, it wasn't the album that it became because of the time factor. You've got to realise the album came out August 87. Sometime between 85 and 86, most of the places that we were working were switching over to digital, and all this new technology was coming on board. Now, we toyed with small amounts of digital outboard gear when we were doing Pyromania, and it brought that album out of the norm. It didn't sound like every other record that came out in 1983. It sounded very different. And so consequently, that's the technology that we were tied down to in 1984 as well, you know. Some of the things like the synclaviers and the Fairlights, and all these like brilliant bits of equipment that were coming out in the 80s didn't actually become commercially available until maybe the middle of 85, and that's coincidentally when all the kind of futuristic part of Hysteria started to take shape. Songs like Rocket, like that whole middle section that's just, you know, crazy, and the middle section of Excitable and the intro of Excitable, all that stuff came about through experimenting with all this new gear that we didn't have when we were writing the initial songs. So the vision was just, it kept changing on a monthly basis. You know, we kept upgrading and improving the record as we went along. It's a good job we did spend as long as we did on it. Otherwise, Hysteria would have kind of ended up being a bit more like Pyromania 2. Mm. And you can tell that because if you listen to the songs off Retroactive, they are a lot more tied to Pyromania than, say, anything off Hysteria. They're a lot more raw and real sounding, whereas there's a lot more Star Wars futuristic stuff going off on Hysteria.
Yeah, yeah. Mutt was he was most famous in those times for having produced 3 of AC/DC's albums, but he hadn't written with them, and he did not write with you on High and Dry. But later on, specifically on Hysteria, what did he bring to the table musically?
Well, you know, you say he was most famous for AC/DC, and for sure Back in Black was the biggest album, but you've got to remember as well that the Cars album and the Foreigner album were just huge records in America, you know. And he didn't necessarily get writing credits with a lot of those people, but there's no doubt that he contributed to the writing of some of those songs. He just was never given any credits. Mm-hmm. You know, with us, we weren't that egotistical where it's, oh, you can't let the producer have a writing credit. The thing is, with a lot of the songs that we wrote with Mutt, he was in the room when we wrote them. So if he made a suggestion for a chord, you know, a riff or a chord change or a lyric or a melody, we were going to give him a writing credit, because you weren't going to turn around to him and say, I want you to shut up because you're not allowed to make suggestions because we're writing the songs, you just do the sound. We're not that kind of band, you know. We wanted his input. So when we were getting together to write songs, there'd be the 5 songwriters in the room. I mean, Rick would be there, but Rick doesn't really write much. But the 5 songwriters would all bounce ideas off each other. So Mutt became part of our team.
Mm-hmm. But the only song that he came in with for you guys was that Love Bites, or did he come with any other first ideas for you?
No, Love Bites was Mutt and Steve and Phil shaped that one, but the title was never there. We actually had a song called Love Bites that we'd already written. Me and Mutt had written lyrics to a song called Love Bites back in Dublin. But when we got to Holland, that song just kind of got pushed to the wayside, but we stole the title. When Mutt brought in this chord sequence idea for Love Bites, and Phil and Steve basically wrote the song with it. We took the title off this original song called Love Bites and stuck it in what's now Love Bites, and what was called Love Bites, it's complicated, is now called I Want to Be Your Hero. So it was a completely different song, you know. Okay. But generally speaking, there were so many songs on that record that everybody ends up getting the same split, because it was too complicated to say, well, I wrote most of that one and I didn't really have much to do with that one. But by the time we got to the end of the record, it worked out that everybody deserved the same. You know, I mean, Rocket was mostly me. Sugar was mostly me. Things like Armageddon, it was mostly Sav. You know, Gods of War was Steve. Phil came in with things like Run Riot at the beginning part. The 3 boys together did Hysteria completely on their own, musically, you know, the whole thing. It was Sav's jangle, it was Phil's bridge and Steve's chorus. It really was a total team effort. Everybody threw bits and bobs into the songs as they grew. So, you know, he came in with no more or no less than anybody else. In fact, less really, because Love Bites was the one song that had a major impact, a major contribution to make. But on all the others, it was no more or less than anybody else. It was always about being a team.
Yeah, because I heard that Mutt came in with the Love Bites, more of a country song.
Yeah, when he was playing the idea for this, it wasn't even a song. He just had this, like, melody and a chord sequence. but he didn't sound anything like what he sounds like now. We use the phrase leopardizing. You know, he needed to be leopardized. And Steve and Phil had a unique way of playing guitar chords. They would complement each other by playing opposite parts to each other instead of playing the same. You know, you get say a band like Judas Priest very often, and in fairness, us as well on early albums like High and Dry, we would almost have guitars playing the same thing. But on Pyromania it started to develop, and on Hysteria we really took it to task that they would play different things. And when you know, if you'd have heard Mutt on an acoustic guitar like he was doing it, you wouldn't really think it was the same song, you know. And it had to be it had to be worked into a style, you know. But they all did, you know. I mean, when I came in with Sugar, I only had the chorus initially. We had to build the whole song around the chorus, you know. But that's how it starts. You come in with an idea and you work backwards from the chorus or forwards from the verse or the intro.
Yeah. So, as you said, Pour Some Sugar was the last song written. Did you? How quickly was it written?
Well, it wasn't even. I mean, we'd finished the album. As far as everybody concerned, they'd all gone home. There was only me and Mutt left, and we were finishing the last song, which is Armageddon. The last song that we recorded, not last song on the album. We hadn't worked out a running order by then. But we just took a tea break or a coffee break, and I just picked up an acoustic guitar and started playing the chorus part, and he came in and asked me what it was, probably thinking it was a song by somebody else, you know. And I just said, it's an idea I had. And he said, dude, he says, that's the best hook I've heard for 5 years. We're going to do that now. And I said, they'll kill you. Everybody thinks we're done. You know, we'd been working on this record for 2 years. Nobody wanted to do a 12th song. But he said, well, you know, there's only me and you here. Do you want to do it? I said, yeah, I want to do it. So we literally put a new piece of tape on the machine and threw up a drum track and, you know, banged some quick guitars down just so we had something to sing on. And we put the chorus together. And we la-la-la'd stuff over the verse. And then when the guys came back after their few days away, we just looked at them quite sheepishly, really, and said, we've kind of got another song, you know, and everybody rolled their eyes and went, no, and went, well, listen to it first. And they heard it, and they all, you know, at first, I would imagine, reluctantly all agreed that, yeah, we should do this. And we did it in about 10 days. It was the quickest thing on the record by a mile. Mm-hmm. And it became the most important song on the record.
Yeah.
It was a really strange journey, that whole album. Very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we go through the first months after Rick's accident, I believe you had just started work on the album with Nigel Green in Holland. What went through your mind at that point? Were you able to get anything done?
Oh yeah, well, when we started working, after we got rid of Steinman, we started working with Nigel about October of '84. So we'd got October, November and December under our belts. We'd got 3 months of the stuff recorded. Mm-hmm. You know, for a lot of people, they'd have an album out and finished by then, but we weren't. By then, we were probably feeling the pressure of we have to follow an album like Pyromania, so this has got to be good, you know. So we wouldn't have been rushing anything, you know. But we had drum tracks recorded for quite a lot of songs. Mm-hmm. So at the time, we were physically capable of carrying on making the album without Rick being there because he'd already done his bit, you know. Mm-hmm. But it's psychologically, it's not really that simple, you know. We all went home for Christmas and New Year, and that's when the accident happened. So we didn't reconvene back in Holland as we were supposed to do, like, you know, 2nd of January. I think we all kind of hung around Sheffield and London and wherever for a week or so while Rick was in hospital, trying to figure out what on earth was going on. You know, we really wasn't sure what we were going to do. You know, we didn't know Rick was going to be able to do what he's been able to do. We obviously probably all individually thought that he'd probably finished. That was his career over. I mean, there isn't really a book of one-armed drummers. So I don't remember what we all collectively thought, but I do remember thinking to myself, well, poor guy, you know, I mean, he's 19 years old, he's lost his arm, and he plays drums in a rock band, or he did. what's he going to do now, you know? But a week or so after he came round, he was unconscious for quite a while. But once he came round and he actually got on the phone and said, look, you know, I've worked this thing out in my head where I think I can actually do it with foot pedals. Other than us thinking he was the morphine talking and he'd gone around the bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then you just have to process the information. You know, you might kind of smile and go, you know, we'll see. But after a week or so, he'd so convinced everybody he could do this. It was like, who are we to say he can't, you know? So he took that whole responsibility away from us. We didn't have to think about who's the next drummer, because it was always going to be Rick. He said, I can do this. And we said, well, you know, I'll know if I can't. If I can't do it, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I'll walk away. But look what he's managed to achieve, you know. And it just so coincided with the fact that he came back to Holland probably about, let me think, March, maybe about 2.5, 3 months after the accident. Because he got fed up of being sitting around his mum and dad's house. He wanted to come and hang out with us. So he came back to Holland and pretty quickly was working on an electronic drum kit, you know, with all the pedals and stuff. And it coincided with the way we were starting to write the songs, the new songs that we were coming out with. All of a sudden, the electronic drum sound became an integral part of the album. Because of the total and beautiful coincidence of him using the electronic kit, just as all this digital equipment was coming to the forefront. So it was like a marriage made in heaven, really, by complete accident.
Mm-hmm. And the album cost so much that you had to sell, like, I don't know how many million copies to break even. And
yeah, about 4 probably.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I think Pause and Sugar was the 4th single or something released, and that's when the album started to sell as well. But how where were you up to that point that you were in the shit?
We were doing, by everybody else's standards, fantastic. You know, we'd sold 4 million albums, but that basically meant we'd just got his money back if we were lucky, you know. Most people would have, excuse the bad joke, cut their arm off to sell 4 million records. But we'd already done 6 million on the previous record, so it was a failure in comparison, you know. But we were working it very hard. It was through no fault of our own. That record was still a great record, even though it wasn't selling as much. It was just, it hadn't caught fire yet, you know. Some albums, they go through the roof on day one. Other albums, they take a long time to take off. I mean, you think about Appetite for Destruction. It was a fantastic record. It is a fantastic record. But that took almost a year to make #1. Just like Hysteria did. It was a slow burn, you know. Mm-hmm. It became part of everybody's DNA basically a year after its release, not straight away. So, you know, we were just... The weird thing is that the album, you know, whenever we talk about the album in this context, we're always talking about its performance in America. What people tend to always overlook is its phenomenal success in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, we left America in April of '88 with the album just doing okay. And we came to Europe and we put more people in Stockholm than ABBA did.
Mm.
You know, we sold just a stupid amount of tickets. We were selling 10, 15, 20,000 seat arenas out in France and Zurich and Stockholm. I mean, like, it was Germany. It was just enormous, that record. It was huge. We had people like the girls out of ABBA came to see us play when we played in Stockholm.
Yeah.
You know, because Steve Clark was like, couldn't get his head around it, you know. And we went to see Prince the night before and we met them all, and it was like, you know, we're in royalty right now. We're with all these royal musicians, you know. And the album, all of a sudden, while we were in Europe, started to go through the roof in America. We went back to America in July. It had sold 3 million copies since we left. It's like the best thing we ever did was leave.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really bizarre. You know, it was, like I said, it was a strange and fantastic journey. Really weird.
Well, speaking of Steve Clark, you're paying a tribute to him in the DVD where you are incorporating an old live clip of him. What was his greatest contribution to Hysteria?
It was Steve's contribution musically. It was Gods of War, which is why we do it at the beginning of Gods of War. That whole guitar extravaganza at the intro after the bass leg, that's all Steve's stuff, because he just wrote really very zany and interesting and eccentric licks. He didn't write standard stuff, 3-chord rockers like AC/DC. He always wrote much more Jimmy Page, Zal Clemenson, Alex Lifeson type stuff. He was very interested in the sonics of a guitar and what you could wring out of the neck rather than just blaring away on chords, you know. His contribution, he never really got into lyric writing or melodies. He was always happy enough to just throw riffs at people and say, look, I've got these 150 riffs. Kind of a bit like Slash, really, I suppose, you know. And he would throw all these riffs into a bucket, basically, and leave everybody else to, you know, weed them out and pick the best ones. He was a riffmeister. That's what he did, you know. Gods of War was a huge thing, contribution-wise from Steve. I mean, it was essentially mostly him, you know. Mm-hmm. What else did Steve do? I mean, some of the guitar work that Steve did on Hysteria, some of his solos, like Armageddon It, for example. His guitar solo in Armageddon It itself is just beautiful because you can totally sing it. It's real melodic, it's real part of the song, not just all about showing off how good he is. It was more from the school of somebody like James Honeyman Scott or Mike Campbell from Tom Petty's band, where he's not showing off how brilliant he is, he's just playing the guitar to suit the song, very much like Mick Ronson used to do.
Yeah. In 1988, the Leppard were probably the biggest band in the world, and it was the wild and crazy 80s. How did that incredible success affect you personally at that point?
Well, we were too busy. We were like, it's like when they say you're in the eye of a storm, you can't really tell that there's a storm on, you know. We were just working the same, we were doing exactly the same thing in, say, August, September 1988 as we were doing in August, September 1987. It was just, you know, we were playing the same songs, but the audience had just changed, you know, and the response to the songs was different. When we played Sugar in August 87, it got, you know, mild applause. When we played it in 88, they went mental, and they still do, you know. So essentially, we were just doing the same thing, you know, get up in the morning, travel to the gig, talk and joke amongst each other, drink coffee, have some lunch, sound check, get ready to do the gig. It was just a routine, you know. The difference was we were having to run a little faster from the venues and hide a little more if we wanted to go to a mall, because you were now very recognizable, and it makes you kind of, we got very insular. We just stayed in the hotels and stayed to ourselves. We don't really court the success in a public way, the way that, say, Lady Gaga would. It's never been our thing, you know. Yeah. So at that time, you know, we hadn't got paid. We weren't earning any money. We were just being very successful. The money would come in 1989 when we'd long finished the tour and all gone back to our private lives, where we essentially disappeared off the face of the earth until Adrenalize comes out. That's the way that we've always been.
And on the Sweden Rock message board forum, we have this voting chart where our readers can vote for their favorite Leppard album, and it looks like Pyromania will be winning over Hysteria. So which one do you prefer of those two albums?
Well, that doesn't surprise me, because, you know, rock magazines or rock websites don't really kind of focus in on the commercial side of stuff. They will always go for the harder edge stuff, you know. I'm surprised it could have been High and Dry, because that's a heavier album than Pyromania, you know. Our audience generally is what we call the silent minority. Sorry, the silent majority. A lot of people that bought Hysteria weren't essentially rock fans. They were pop fans. They were people that wouldn't go on a forum for Sweden Rocks. You know, the ones that go on there are the much more hardcore fans that want to hear the B-sides and the early stuff. So I totally get why they would go for Pyromania. I really do.
Yeah.
Which is my favourite of the two?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've no idea. I really can't pick because if you want my honest answer, I haven't listened to either of them in years. You know, other than listening to Hysteria for research, when I wasn't listening to it to enjoy it, I was listening to it to find out what I needed to do. That's a completely different way of listening to a record. I've not sat down with a beer and a smile on my face and gone, okay, let's play them back to back, you know, and you don't see what kind of memories they throw up. I don't really know. As far as I can tell, I think that I would probably prefer Hysteria, only because I think the songwriting is stronger. I prefer my singing on Hysteria. I was getting to the point on Pyromania when I wasn't enjoying the screamy high stuff as much. It's really painful, to be quite honest, and I prefer Billy Idol registers on things like Sugar and Armageddon than doing the rock and roll, you know, Highway to Hell type stuff, which I can do, but I don't want to do it on 10 songs in a row. So Rock Till You Drop, Rock of Ages, Photograph, Stage Fright, all these things that are in really high keys, eventually they take a toll on your throat, and I was very insistent when we did Hysteria, I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I can see why Robert Plant doesn't do it anymore either. It's just a natural progression. It's really hard. You talk to Brian Johnson and ask him how easy is it to sing those songs, and he'll tell you it ain't easy, it's hard. And that's not being lazy, it's just using your voice in a different way, that you can use it for singing. I've always been a fan of melody, and I believe that there's more melody on Hysteria, which makes it less of a rock record. So I understand. I like, don't get me wrong, I love Pyromania. I think Pyromania is a great record. There's some good songs on there, and it's the album that broke us, at least in North America and Japan, if nowhere else. But I think I'd probably prefer Hysteria, but you know, they wouldn't be my top two records that we've ever made anyway.
Yeah. All right, to finish it off.
I actually prefer Sparkle Lounge to either of them, to be quite honest.
Okay.
But that's just me, I'm weird.
Well, last thing, if you were able to go back in time, what would you change with Hysteria?
I'd redo some of the vocals, because some of it was all a bit rushed towards the end, you know, even though we threw this last song on, you know. I think, personally, that the live version of Don't Shoot Shotgun is better than the album version. I think that we tried too hard. We were trying to get Shotgun to sound like the Stones, and we just don't do the Stones well, you know. We just don't do that sleazy thing in the studio as well as we should. But live, it really works, you know. So I would probably make Shotgun a little less synthetic sounding. We definitely use the studio too much in Shotgun. But other than that, there's really not much else I'd change, you know. I mean, I would like to have done it a little less expensively, you know. But it's all part of the journey. If we'd have spent 1 penny, 1 krona less on that record, it may have been a different album that didn't have the success that it's achieved. So I don't like messing with history. It is what it is, right or wrong. It's part of the journey that gets us to where we are in 2013, and it allowed us to have this fantastic experience in Vegas earlier this year, you know, and now the cinema experience and the DVD. So there's really not much you can say that we did it wrong. There's obviously, you know, any artist in the world will pick apart their own work to a point.